Similar lines to this can occur after a5, a4, bishop b4 check, and now c3, knight takes c3. If instead of c3, white plays bishop d2, then he gets hit by the move knight f4, attacking the queen, this pawn on g2, and also the pawn on d4. So white's usual move after the bishop check has been to go king f1, but then of course he loses castling rights without making any kind of dent on black's position. Upon realising that knight e5 isn't dangerous for black after all, white has generally chosen to play in a way analogous to the main line, with h5, bishop h7, bishop d3. But now we start to see the advantages of black having delayed the knight d7 move. He plays bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, e6, and is now ready to attack the d4 pawn with c5, followed by bringing his knight out to c6. Another advantage of this delayed knight d7 is that if white tries to take the h2 b8 diagonal by going bishop out to f4, black can immediately challenge this bishop with bishop d6. After a further knight e5, queen c7, black wants to eliminate this knight on e5 by going knight d7 on his next move. And in 2 games against the Spanish player Margen Badals, Tivyakov has tried 2 different moves and on neither occasion got anywhere. The first game was from the 1998 New York Open, in which he played knight e4, and after knight takes e4, queen takes e4, knight d7, brought his rook into play with rook h3. But then black castled queenside, white also castled queenside, and now black exchanged into a completely equal position with knight takes e5. Instead of knight e4, Tivyakov castled queenside in their game in Beijing. But again he got absolutely nothing after knight d7, challenging the knight on e5, and now knight e4 was met by knight takes e4, queen takes e4, castles queenside once again. I actually think that black could have castled kingside in this position if he wanted a sharper straddle. Black wants to undermine white's d4 pawn with his thematic c5, and the open d and c files in this position will point directly at white's king. Instead of knight e5, Tivyakov simply exchanged bishops with bishop takes d6 in his game against Henkin from Arco 1998. But of course this wasn't enough for any advantage. Henkin recaptured of course, and then castle's queenside was met by knight bd7, and after white played king b1, black castled kingside. Again we've got an opposite side castling scenario in which black's going to play on the d and c files with c5 and rook fd8 followed by rook ac8. Once again it's quite possible that white's king will feel the draft. With bishop f4 running into what is effectively a brick wall after bishop d6, most white players have tended to put this bishop on a more modest square, d2. Now however black can instigate his plan with c5, hitting d4, and if white castles queenside, he brings his knight out to c6. If white now defends this d4 pawn by going bishop c3, black can play queen d5, both centralising his queen and hitting this pawn on a2. A game between Asrian and Yermolinsky from New York 1998 continued d takes c5, queen takes d3, rook takes d3, and now bishop takes c5, which actually hits this pawn on f2. White played bishop takes f6, black recaptured of course, and then he went knight e4. But just bishop e7 was really fine for black. One important thing to remember is that in many Caro-Kann endgames, black actually gets chances because of the potential weakness of this pawn on h5. If instead of bishop c3, white plays his bishop to e3, then black should develop his queen with queen out to b6. In a game between Agnos and Anatoly from the Greek Team Championship in 1998, white now played queen b3, and after queen takes b3, a takes b3, c takes d4, knight takes d4, black could actually have got the better endgame by now playing the sharp move knight d5, hitting this bishop on e3. After knight takes c6, black doesn't recapture on c6, but instead takes off this bishop on e3. And after f takes e3, b takes c6, the move knight e4 can be met by rook d8, stopping the knight from coming into d6. Anatoly's analysis continued with g4, and now he suggested that black plays his bishop out to b4, the idea being that the bishop can come to a5 and then b6 to hit this pawn on e3. Once again, a critical factor for black in this endgame is the weakness of white's kingside pawns on h5 and now also g4. Black will often be able to set up a passed pawn on the kingside quite quickly, which supported by his bishop should outplay a knight. In his game against Granda from Amsterdam 1996, the young Russian star Morozovich played knight e4. Granda, however, replied with a sharp knight b4, and now knight takes f6 check was really forced, and after g takes f6, queen c4, Granda re-centralised his knight on b4 with knight d5. The point of this is that after d takes c5, knight takes e3, f takes e3, black can recapture this pawn on c5, in this case with his bishop, and once again he emerges with a superior pawn structure. Morozovich actually played e4 here, but then Granda activated his rook on this open g file with rook g8, hitting the pawn on g2. White defended it with queen e2, and now Granda played a quite original move. He went queen a6. The point of which is that he really isn't concerned about the exchange of queens on a6, giving him another set of double pawns. After b takes a6, this pawn on g2 is a much more serious weakness. In the game, Morozovich chose to play rook he1, but after queen takes e2, rook takes e2, black stood better in the endgame anyway. He's got a good bishop against a knight, white's pawns on h5, g2 and e4 look rather weak, and black can start to restrict white's queenside with, say, rook c8 and b5. Instead of castling queenside, the American Grandmaster John Fedorowicz played knight e4 in his game against Yermolinsky from Washington 97. Black now played his knight out to c6, and after knight takes f6 check, queen takes f6, d takes c5, bishop takes c5, White played bishop c3 and offered a draw which was accepted. This doesn't really tell us much, although I think black's fine in this position. He can play e5, and if white now plays queen d5, black counters with bishop d4. Black intends to continue his development with, say, castles kingside and bring a rook to d8. I do think that c5 is black's sharpest and strongest move in this position, although I'd like to mention in passing that the Russian GM Davies has been playing bishop e7 followed by castling kingside, and only later thinking about going c5. As shown in his own games, this also looks completely playable. Another sound possibility for black is to actually develop his bishop on d6. As a correspondence player from Switzerland called Klugel has been doing in some recent games. The idea behind this move is to deprive white of the e5 square and simply continue developing, probably with knight d7, queen c7, and then castling either kingside or queenside. In his attempts to squeeze something from this position, white might turn his attention to a new hybrid line with knight e5, bishop h7, and now bishop d3, which turned out to be successful for white in a game between Adams and Leko from Linares 1999. Leko played bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, e6, and after bishop d2 brought his knight out to d7. White now supported this knight on e5 with the move f4, and black had trouble breaking free from white's grip. I think that it would be much more in the spirit of black's line to play his bishop out to e7, followed by castles, and then go for c5. The idea once again is a fierce counterattack on this d4 pawn. Instead of bringing his knight out to f3 to go knight e5, white can also play the knight round to h3. The idea behind this apparently odd-looking move is that after e6, white wants to play knight f4, bishop h7, bishop c4, and after knight f6, castles, bishop d6, trying to get castled, white can sacrifice a piece with knight takes e6. The point of this is that after f takes e6, bishop takes e6, black's king is temporarily caught in the centre. Now, whilst the soundness of this sacrifice is in doubt, I recommend that black can play in a much more simple way and avoid it altogether. After knight h3, I think that black should actually avoid presenting white with a target with e6, and instead go knight f6. After knight f4, bishop h7, bishop c4, once again I think he should avoid e6 and instead bring his knight out to a6. The point of this move is that black wants to play knight c7 and then e6, with an incredibly solid position. In passing, you should note that if white plays bishop takes a6, black doesn't need to recapture with b takes a6, which would actually leave his pawns in rather a mess. Instead, he can recover the bishop by going queen a5 check, and after bishop d2, queen takes a6, white can't even castle kingside.
This is Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for onlinechesslessons.net. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, the 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from onlinechesslessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damien for onlinechesslessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.